This is the Men's Group Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Galla. Guys want to overcome challenges and improve parts of their lives for themselves and for their loved ones, but guys don't have access to supportive conversations or healthy male role models. So we interview leading men who have overcome their challenges in healthy ways so that guys can learn healthy ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving. Most of what we talk about is just everyday nuts and bolts guy stuff. So if you benefit from these conversations, you can check out our free self-improvement community or our free online men's groups over at mensgroup.com. Now, let's talk about some guy stuff. Today at Men's Group, we have Jordan Caron. I've known Jordan for 18 years. He's in my personal men's group, and he's become one of my closest friends. I wanted Jordan to be the first guest on the Men's Group podcast because he's overcome so many personal challenges and grown so much over the last few years. His persistence with regards to overcoming his challenges and living in healthier ways has been so inspiring for me and all the guys in our men's group. He really has gone from being a basic bro to being a really happy, healthy, successful guy. What I love about Jordan's story is how relatable it is for most guys. As a former professional golfer, Jordan spent much of his time watching sports, drinking beers with the guys, shooting the breeze about nothing, and indulging in his addictions like sports gambling, porn, and drinking. He was unable to express his emotions, and he wasn't pursuing his passions of DJing and producing dance music, and just felt blah. It wasn't until his relationship ended that he realized that he needed to make some changes. So he started to address his health, his addictions, which led to deeper work. He ended up changing his social circle and a lot more. In this episode, we primarily focus on what it was like to break out of his old way of living, how he was able to shake off his unhealthy habits and begin to live a more productive, healthy, meaningful life. We also get into his addictions and what caused them, including the emotions from the early passing of his father and brother. Again, if you want access to more of these kinds of conversations, go over and check out mensgroup.com. Let's start this again. Sorry. First podcast intro and I already botched it.
You're worse. This is going to be like me where I fucking have like 20 takes of like a 5-minute thing.
That always happens to me too. Yeah, so you were a golf pro and you were hanging around the golf club a lot.
Yeah.
And you were going to the pub and the bar with the guys, to have drinks after work, talking about whatever guys talk about in those scenarios of sports and boobs and beer.
Yeah.
You're wrestling with your addictions. You're just kind of like at that point you were kind of just a basic bro, like a sports guy, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think you ended up being that way? Why were you drawn to that? Why did you think that, watching sports and betting on sports and hanging around with guys that are doing that is the way to be?
Well, I think it was just my upbringing, and it's nothing against my parents, it's just that my dad got me into sports, and it wasn't even really him. He'd play sports, and I saw that. I was like, yeah, I want to play sports. And it started with baseball, and then it turned into golf. And then we'd watch sports together, and next thing you know, I'm playing basketball too, and I'm playing all these sports. And then you're surrounding yourself with those guys, and yeah, for me, it was the natural path. I didn't know any other way, especially for me. Like, I wanted to be a big famous golfer, and I wanted to play on the PGA Tour and travel around, and I got somewhat close, but that was all I knew. I didn't have any other idea that there was something else out there. So it wasn't, one thing. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess it was just the way that I was, liking those things as a kid, and never once questioned it, and then never once questioned who I was hanging around with and how that could have effects on me. So yeah, that's how it came to be.
Yeah, what was it like hanging out in those environments? You said everybody's all rah-rah, projecting this image of we're all having a good time, we're confident, we're feeling good about ourselves. But and so what was the image that you were trying to project there to keep up with that, and what were you actually feeling on the inside?
Well, I mean, when you get together with a big group, it's always like there's a lot of energy, and excitement and a lot of laughter. And it was good vibes for the most part in terms of positivity of like, having a good time, but, actually looking at it. And like, for me, alcohol was a big part of that, and for everybody else. And to me, I have different views on alcohol now, but alcohol is definitely or I was using it to curb and suppress anxiety about being in social situations, and also, depression. It was definitely a tool for me to not handle my depression and sit with it and cover it up. So when in those environments, just there's a lot of big energy. You'd have your alpha males. Those are ones that be kind of leading the conversations or the jokes, and having talks. And it just, for the most part, was difficult to kind of take a look back and go, yeah, this isn't quite healthy. But when you're in there, it's there's definitely this mentality that like everything's great and everything's grand, and I think at the end of the day, a lot of it is just like drinking away your problems.
Yeah. I think a lot of guys can relate to that, myself included.
Yeah.
Going through a phase like that too. And so you're going out with the guys, and you're working a job, and you're not really thinking much about who you want to become or why you're doing what you're doing. And I've talked about before how a part of that time for you was also being like not very expressive, right? You were kind of felt emotionally numbed out.
Oh yeah.
You had a hard time expressing what you were feeling and expressing yourself in general. You felt kind of flat. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and at the time I didn't know what it was from, but I was definitely numbing myself down. I was numbing myself down to the addictions. I know you want to talk about that at another point in time, but like alcohol, pornography, and gambling were all ways for me to numb down. I had lost my brother and my father within 3 years when I was in my early 20s, and not expecting something like that to happen and hit me so close, I didn't know how to handle it. And I turned to those things, my three-headed monster, I'm calling them, to escape the feelings of sadness and depression and anxiety. And it was a struggle to even identify that I had issues. I've talked about it a lot recently with some friends, whether it's a somatic breathwork practitioner that I work with or other friends. Like I remember being like an 8-year-old kid, like having uncontrollable fits of laughing. And like getting to that point where like, you hold it together and then you think you got it for a couple seconds and then you just start laughing like uncontrollably.
Those are the best.
I know, and I missed that. And I think what happened was like I started to control those things because I was like worried about being like, oh, this is an uncomfortable situation. This is an awkward thing. I need to control it. And I've learned to control it. Or even those bouts of crying. I remember playing baseball as a kid. Whenever I'd strike out, I'd start crying. And I was like, because I was like so emotionally attached to the game and to succeed, but over the years that stuff just went away. And I think it kind of happened around 12, 13, 14 when it wasn't anybody who said anything to me, but I guess I just had this perception that I had to man up and keep those emotions close, especially when I was playing golf. A big part of the way that I modeled myself to play golf was after another golfer who showed very little emotion, whether good or bad, on the golf course. So I think that started the programming of this like numbing, keeping things in, don't show your cards. And that just took off when I started to turn to the addictions even more.
Man, I love how you talked about that, and even the idea of checking your smile. I've seen my dad do that. My dad does that a lot. He'll laugh about something, and then he'll like check it, like, oh no, feeling too much, having too much fun, or life's like, you're not supposed to feel that good. I don't know exactly what it is, but I've noticed a lot of people doing it since I've become aware of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and I just picked up on it recently. I'm like, oh man, I used to always do that, but I think I started to control it because I wanted to like not be out of control with that emotion. But it just, it was so much fun as a kid doing that, and I actually trying to tap into that again.
Well, it's been so inspiring to see you do that, because like knowing you for 18 years, you were kind of a flat guy. You were kind of just always monotone and kind of even keel. And now in our men's group, or when we hang out, you're like cracking jokes and razzing guys, but in like a real authentic way. You really are stepping into who you are, and part of that's you feel more comfortable to express that part of you, which is great. So tell me about the guys, more about the people you're hanging out with during that time too. And like, I would describe you probably as a popular guy. You're a golf pro, so you're like automatically one of the, excuse the term, but one of the big swinging dicks of the golf course, because you're the guy that everybody looks up to in that environment. So you have no shortage of friends or people to hang out or have a beer with, right? But like, how are those guys negatively influencing your experience as a man or growth as a man, without you even noticing it at that time, looking back now?
Well, I mean, based on who I was as a kid, I was very social, and I hate the popularity thing, but yeah, playing sports and I was good at most sports that I played. You definitely have that like, oh, you're popular. But at the same time, there's kids who are definitely very quiet and closed off. I didn't have that problem. And then obviously going into the golf industry after I wasn't going to be able to play on the PGA Tour, I started working at a golf course, and part of that job is like customer service and socializing. And then I integrated myself into the club quite well and started to hang out with some older men. And there were some good influences that were older, but I switched and started playing with a group of guys who are around my age. And I'm not bashing them at all or bad talking them. Again,
No.
there's, a few good seeds, and each one's got their things that I love about them, but there's definitely some stuff that I believe that they need to work on. But yeah, it was definitely hindering me trying to tap into this again and to try to express some emotion, that sadness, that depression, that anxiety, and not having enough conversations and not having a circle to share stuff that I was ashamed of admitting definitely didn't help. Yeah, opening up my heart again and being okay with the fact that I was imperfect, and we're
Yeah,
all imperfect.
and it seems like a simple thing, but like they would always be like, "Hey, come have a drink," or "Hey," they would always be interested in doing things that are based in distraction. It seems like, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And every once in a while I'd bring something up to a few of the guys and they'd have the support, or vice versa. I would try to pry into someone a little bit more to talk about, hey, like you lost your mom when you were 6 years old. Like, how's that? Like,
Fuck, what was that like? Yeah.
yeah. And,
Yeah.
to get an answer, not surprisingly, like, yeah, like me and my family don't talk about it. And it's just like, I'm kind of the same way, but like, maybe, it's not a good thing. And they're like, oh yeah, like I know, like I need to work on this stuff, but like often or not, they're probably not. So,
No.
yeah, but definitely, yeah, alcohol, distraction.
Bad advice.
Yeah, and and with through other close friends too, I got terrible advice, especially relating to relationships and truth and honesty. And I just
Hmm.
looked at their relationships and saw that they were succeeding, and I got some really bad advice from people who had been in a marriage for 5 or 10 years, and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I need to stop looking outwards for advice and start looking inwards and trusting this guy.
Hmm. Yeah, and you actually got some bad advice that contributed to the demise of that relationship. You don't have to share the details of it,
No, no.
but it's looking back. Would you say that those guys were having a much bigger negative impact on you, your well-being, than you recognized at the time?
Yeah, probably. I'm not bashing or bad talking.
No,
There was a lot of great moments and times with that,
they were
but
great for that period of your life. It sounds like.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I've been going down this path of like everything has served me at a certain point and learning to love that stuff instead of being regretful or angry towards it. Even my addictions, I've learned to actually love and embrace them because at the time I didn't know any different and I had to turn to them to cope. And
Hmm.
I've learned to accept that and show love and compassion for those things instead of, what a lot of people generally do is just beat themselves up over those things. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I have a lot of love and compassion for those guys because, yeah, a lot of, those guys were there when I did need to deal with some stuff. But yeah, there's just definitely some downsides
Yeah.
to it. I wasn't like a complete shitbag,
No,
but
you wouldn't be
yeah,
here if you were.
no, yeah,
We're in my men's group.
yeah,
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. And so you have this relationship thing happen, and so I guess let's ask the question: what was the catalyst that really kicked off your interest in personal growth? Because for a number of years, you like you were just going along doing the basic sports bro thing, and most guys will go their whole life that without looking at themselves and, hey, why am I like this? Why am I choosing to take these actions? What is it about my past that makes me think about things in this way? All of a sudden, you went from being like on a track that most guys follow, which is like avoid my feelings at all costs and not look at myself critically, to all of a sudden, hey, I'm interested in this stuff now. What caused that change?
Well, that don't forget that was years ago too. That was 10 years ago probably where I went
Yeah.
through that initial change, which was a big financial issue that I had because of the sports gambling, because I was living well outside of my means, and living a lifestyle that I couldn't afford, that all these financial poor financial decisions and the sports gambling caught up with me, and that was around
Yeah.
2010, 2011. And then I was like, okay, I need to work on this stuff, and I started going down the path of spirituality, reading Eckhart Tolle, his books, reading a lot of marketing stuff. And at that time, that's when you were helping me with the internet marketing and getting educated and teaching myself about that stuff, because I knew that I knew there was a lifestyle out there for me that was far better than working a typical 9 to 5. So that's when it started. And I was going along pretty well up until probably 2013, 14, when, that's when I decided to sort of rest on everything and, like stop going down that path. I felt like, okay, I've gotten out of this hole of this financial struggle. I paid off my debts.
I'm good. I'm good
Yeah,
now.
exactly. Started my business, and I was like, yeah. And I knew that I was resting on my laurels, and I rejoined the golf club, and I got back in, and business was going great, and I was traveling, and it wasn't focused on growing my business much at all. I was more of like, yeah, this is my reward for all this hard work and these 2 or 3 years of doing that. But then, yeah, things just sort of plateau, and even in some ways went declining because I wasn't actually still working on those main issues, which were the addictions, and getting into why I was turning to those addictions. But then it came back, obviously, after the end of this relationship about a little over 2 years ago now. And it started with my health, my physical health. I'd always been ashamed of my body. I wasn't necessarily overweight, but I was definitely uncomfortable with my weight, and I'd always wanted to lose weight. And the first thing.
You had a dad bod. You had a dad bod similar to what I got right now.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, like not thick in the arms or legs or anything, but definitely gut, up in the man boobs. Not happy with myself, and that was more of a representation overall of not being happy with myself, not cleaning up my diet, not exercising enough, not being committed deeply to improving my overall physical and mental health. So I joined Orange Theory in October of 2019. I think it was like October 10th. So
That's like a workout gym for those that aren't in Vancouver.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's all over North America.
Is it? I don't even know.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, I mean, it's your high intensity workout class, and at the time they'd have it broken down into 3 segments. Don't need to get into the details, but it was definitely a huge catalyst for me to make that first push, which was like, okay, I want to feel better about myself, and I've been feeling shitty about myself because of this appearance, and I need to lose weight. And for a lot of different reasons, not only my health, my long-term health, but also too just feeling better mentally about myself. So that was the first big catalyst. And then over the course of the year and a bit, at the end of 2020, I had set my goal. I was at the time when I joined Orange Theory about 200. I set a goal at the end of 2020 to lose 30 pounds and get down to 170. And I got down to 170, and I was like, okay, fuck, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I was so proud of myself to not only commit to exercise, but also my diet and cleaning up my diet. So that was, the biggest point, but it was the relationship ending because of my, again, 3-headed monster. Gambling came up, alcohol not so much, but porn came up, and struggles sexually with her and intimacy were all there. And obviously being ashamed of those things, not admitting them, was coming out. She was having to pry this stuff out of me, which was really unfortunate. But deep down, I didn't love myself, and I was ashamed of myself, and I wasn't embracing my imperfections, and I wasn't changing, and I wasn't making the right moves.
Yeah, so I we'll come back to the relationship stuff and intimacy stuff here shortly, but to touch on one thing, so this is why I love your story, Jordan. It's so relatable to most men, including myself, right? You're not feeling great about your body, which is like a sign that you're not feeling great about yourself in general, probably. But you come at it from a very logical way, which is, I'm going to start working out, right? How did you go from that step to then, oh, wait, there's more behind the scenes here. I probably really have some emotional things to address, like my self-worth or whatever. Like, because a lot of guys stop there. They're like, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to get fit, and then it's fine. And then, but nothing really changes even if they do get fit. They still feel crummy.
Yeah, and I think it was going back to just entering into that relationship. I knew deep down that, I didn't want to be watching porn. I had a friend, we'd always try to do like a no porn challenge for, a few months, and wiping our Instagram accounts clean of the bikini/porn models, basically, and doing that, but not having much success and always turning back to it. But But yeah, I think it was like, okay, I've got this part. I'm proud of myself. What's the next thing I need to level up? Okay, well, I need to dig into these addictions and I need to figure out why I'm turning to them, because I don't want to be turning to them anymore. They've caused me to get to this point where I'm so emotionally numb that I can't even have love for myself or another person. So the next one was alcohol.
Yeah. So why weren't these things allowing you to feel love for another person or express love for another person? Why were they affecting you in that way? Because a lot of guys think, oh, these are just normal things that everybody does, and no big deal. I'm doing fine. Most of us are functioning addicts.
Sure.
Myself included,
Yeah.
with food, with porn in the past, with seeking sex and validation from women, dating apps. But I'm functioning, so not a big deal, right? But why was it? Why was it affecting you? How was it?
I think just the numbing down was a big part of that, but also too, not feeling good internally about losing, $5,000 in a month on gambling,
Right.
or
That'll do it.
yeah, like, and trying to hide that too, like keeping that in, like bottling that up, the body keeps your traumas in, and
Yeah.
you're not releasing that and not expressing that and holding the secret, like terrible, terrible feelings towards oneself. And yeah, definitely the numbing, but just always turning to those things instead of sitting with things and thinking about them, and always distracting, whether it's even TV and
Mm.
Netflix, and distracting that way as well, and just trying to avoid everything that's supposed to be coming out. But like, no, I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel this.
Yeah. And then that translates into your personal relationships, not just how you feel about yourself, but also like you're pushing that all down. It's hard to express what you're feeling with your partner, how to express what
Yeah.
you're feeling with friends, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've had to learn a lot about what love actually is. And it's not just saying I love you, and it's not just being there for that person, but it's also like loving yourself and being truthful and honest and wanting to grow together, and, and trying to change yourself for the better so that the relationship can change as well.
Totally.
But for me, there was just a lack of self love towards myself, that I couldn't feel that person's love. Like, I put this fucking piece of armor around my heart through all these
Mm.
the traumas of losing my brother and my dad, and through then numbing myself down anymore. I just didn't want to feel. And I remember even at some points, whenever I did feel anxiety about dating women, whether it was my last relationship or a few others, and having a lot of excitement towards these women, I remember actually having some anxiety, and then like turning to alcohol to like curb that, whether it was on a date with them, or whether it was like, you have all these butterflies and you're not quite sure where they are, and like, oh, having like, I'd go to the restaurant or a pub and have like 3 or 4 beer to like, no, can't feel that.
Totally.
Wasn't and it wasn't that I was thinking about those things. It was just a natural reflection to not feel, and to be like, whoa, I don't like this. The uncomfortableness of those feelings for me, and that discomfort made me turn to something that made me feel comfortable, whether it was drinking, whether it was porn, or whether it was a sports bet.
And do you think that contributed to the depression quite a bit? Because my understanding of the feelings is that if you numb one, you numb them all. So I've noticed that the more that I get into like the other side of the feelings, if I let myself feel the uncomfortable things, the sadness about myself, the anxiety that I'm feeling about work, the frustration I have with my partner at certain times, then I'll notice if I let myself feel those things, I'll notice the birds in the trees. I'll laugh more fully, right? I'll notice myself skipping down the street a bit, versus like if I push those things down, then it will end up doing the opposite. I just can't see any of that stuff, and life's just kind of dull. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of the same in that, like, you're pushing the stuff to not feel anything, therefore not see anything, and try to keep things on sort of like that even keel, where, like you say, you don't notice and appreciate those little tiny things, like the sun poking through the trees and creating that beautiful sort of holy
Oh
glow,
yeah, the
and
best.
having that stuff, and also too tying this in, like the ability to get out in nature and appreciate nature, like you're just talking about birds chirping, being grateful for those things. So it can be an important step to, yeah, opening that up again, and not feeling so flatlined, or just maybe not excited about much. and like actually getting excited about those little tiny things, such a huge component, I believe, to what my overall mental well-being has been. Or getting outside in nature, or just having little bits of appreciation for these things that get forgotten, I think, by a lot of people in society, because we're just constantly trying to like distract and always keep ourselves busy.
Yeah, I mean, everybody seems to love social media for the most part, and to me, after just listening to so many guys in men's groups, it just seems like it's just another one of those distraction tools that our society's pushing, along with movies and then sports and anything entertainment that's like, that serves a purpose. Yeah, it's great, but like if you're using it to distract yourself from your own internal experience, then it's not great, because that's going to have effects on your life, right?
No, exactly. And I believe those things are all in place for that reason, because once we actually start to sit and think more about ourselves and our overall well-being and this planet, then I do believe we're going to have some different thoughts and feelings towards things like, actually, how healthy is Netflix to a society? How healthy is Facebook and Instagram to our society?
For me, it's not healthy at all. For you, it's not healthy at all. So I assume that applies to the guys listening too.
No, and I mean, I've learned to use Instagram in a slightly different way. I use it for inspiration, for spirituality, or I use it for messaging. I've got a few friends that it's like the only voice messaging, method we can use. And I'm trying to use it in those ways rather than like, my ADHD brain is like sitting there and I've like got a couple minutes. It's like reach for the phone or go to my computer, and it's amazing how programmed I have into my typing FAC for Facebook, like into like it's just this automatic habit, and it's messed up. And I'm like, God, so it's just trying to break those habits, and instead of turning to those things, just being patient and still and sitting there just even for a minute and saying, okay, why am I choosing to go to that thing? I need some sort of gratification. I need something to make myself feel better. And instead of doing that, just sitting there with those thoughts. Okay, why? Why do I need that gratification hit? I'm okay. I'm as I am. I'm whole as I am. So trying to do that as much as possible instead of turning to those things.
Yeah, I love that moment you and I had a few weeks ago where you're like, hey, fuckface, why aren't you following me on Instagram? And I was like, but you were asking that because you were going through your followers to remove people, right? To curate your list. And I responded, well, hey man, I only use it for memes, like funny stuff and surf accounts. And so we both realized that we were both, curating our list, and we had a good laugh about it. Since doing that, I've had a lot more anxiety, and I felt a lot better about myself versus seeing all the things that I can't have. Oh, wow, there's people on boats right now with babes and champagne. Fuck, my life sucks.
Or I bet doing that. I bet for you that like the van builders, following all those van builder accounts and seeing before and afters and going like, oh, that's what I want with my van, and not being there. Yeah, you get that. Yeah. Like, oh, I know.
And even just following friends, even not these like Instagram influencers that are projecting that they always live the best life. Even seeing my friends are on a trip or somewhere cool, or they've accomplished something, just sometimes it ends up my default is to feel, that's evidence that I'm not doing good enough,
And that's even interesting. I'm trying to post a lot more about my issues or about my things that I struggle with as like, hey, this is, actually who I am. Because for the longest time, my Instagram would only be, again, like any sort of media outlet, you control the messaging and you're putting out only usually a positive message about your life. And a lot of people, even myself included, probably don't post those negative things because, well, nobody wants to go on this to see my negative shit. And this is all, and it's like, well, actually, that's just part of life. Like, how is that any different from us just having a one-on-one conversation and talking about your shit and things that you need to get over? Like, I think, some people are just not comfortable with airing that out there. But I found that when I've done that, I did a post earlier in the year just talking about my struggles with addiction and how I'd wanted to be living a dream where I'd be producing music and chasing that dream of that. And, I got a lot of positive feedback and even people reaching out to me to wanting to talk about their shit, their issues. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. And every time I think even in that post, I said like, if you don't get anything out of this, at least at the very most, I hope that you learn more a little about me and my struggles and who I actually am as a person. And also too, maybe you take an internal look at yourself and go, yeah, actually I am struggling with this, and it's okay to admit that. And we don't have to always be presenting this magical fairy image of who we are on social media.
Yeah, and you learn something that we've experienced in our men's group, and that is that people can usually relate, and they have their own stuff going on, or they've been through something similar in the past, so there isn't a lot of harm in sharing. And I know that in your past, you were quite afraid to share this stuff, right? There's a lot of fear. Talk about that quickly.
It's just deep-rooted shame and embarrassment about these things, even though, for example, porn, pretty much, I'm not going to state a number, but I would imagine the majority of guys watch porn and get themselves
98%. Yeah.
But they don't talk about it. It's like this, hidden thing where you got your hoodie on and your, fucking lights off. There's this comedian, Hannibal Buress, has got a great skit about that, actually. But we all keep it super private. Some guys are open and even talk about like the porn stars that they get themselves off to, and they share shit. And it's just like, that's a whole nother level of like really uncomfortableness for me.
Yeah.
But again, all doing it and accepting it, and the biggest thing that I've found with it is its frustration, because it is so socially acceptable but not talked about, yet nobody actually talks about the potential negative impacts of watching porn from the mentality of the brain and traumatizing the brain so much over the years. And then not even to open up another can of worms, but sex trafficking within porn industry and the amount of rape and abuse and even death. There's some fucked up shit out there, but yeah, not enough guys talking about it and maybe saying, yeah, like, what, I'm actually struggling in bed, and sitting down having a conversation and going, well, maybe actually porn has been affecting you and how you, even get an erection or how you even get off inside your partner. Mm-hmm. I just chuckle at ED commercials. It's like, take this pill and everything will go away. And it's just like, well, maybe we should actually look at the root cause of this. And for a lot of guys, the root cause is because they've been watching porn for 15, 20 years, and their brain's been so traumatized and adjusted to getting themselves off to pixels and looking at something rather than the sensation of their partner. So
yeah, as a guy with high testosterone myself, like I've had it tested and it's high, and I've got a really hairy back, and so I know I'm that high on that T category. I never had an issue with it, so I could watch porn, didn't seem to affect my sex drive. But having heard your story and like the thousands of guys in men's group, like it comes up every week, hearing how porn has affected their sex lives, especially as of now that I'm getting older. I'm like, oh wow, I gotta take that seriously,
Yeah. And I think even the other side of porn is that, like, if you're with somebody and you're watching porn to get yourself off with, to me, that's cheating. You are going to something else, someone else, generally a woman and whatever you're into. You're going to something else to get yourself off, to achieve, that full masturbation, and that to me is cheating. It's a visual way of cheating. I personally don't think it's healthy, and I know I was doing that in my last relationship, and yeah, I knew it was not good, but I was just like, if I fucked up or I said something bad or I damaged the relationship anyway, I just didn't want to feel that, so I'd go get myself off to porn to make myself feel better. And it was just this disgusting cyclical cycle of doing something bad, not feeling good about it, not sitting with those feelings, not figuring out how to change it, but like turning to something to make me feel better, which was actually in essence hurting the relationship even more and hurting myself more.
Yeah, big time. I've never thought of that as cheating, because I know that and a lot of people engage in fantasy even if they're completely fulfilled sexually in a relationship. But I do like the hard line you're drawing there with yourself, and also just acknowledging that it's not healthy. I think that's something we can't agree upon.
Again, that's my belief that
I think it's great.
Is a form of cheating. Even though, like, I actually went to a sex counselor, and she's just like, well, it's okay to, if you're walking down the street and even though you're in a relationship, you see somebody and you might draw to the fantasy of being with that person. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's one thing, but actually, like, pulling your dick out, getting yourself off to this piece of porn, that was like, okay, that to me is not healthy. So that's my opinion. Sure, a lot of guys don't agree with it, but I think long as as long as they're actually internalizing and actually going, well, I do have issues with sexuality or intimacy, and I have been watching porn, to at least question the tie. And I get frustrated going on to a lot of these sites and seeing like, oh no, it's okay, it's acceptable. Well, it's acceptable, but like, deep down, honestly, look at yourself, look at your sexual relationships. in the past, present, and yeah, if there is nothing going on, and then obviously it's not an issue with you, but I know for a lot of guys it is an issue, and I just sort of was like, man, not a big deal. It's okay, I got this.
Maybe for some guy it's not an issue, but man, anytime a guy says that, I raise an eyebrow, and then sure enough, like, 3 to 6 months later, there's some relationship problem that's partly related to that that pops up in that guy's life. So I've seen enough of those stories now where whenever some guy says, oh no, porn's good for me, I believe it's good, why not? Personal preference. I'm always like, really?
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. Skepticism for sure, but
yeah. So stepping back, so coming back a step. So you're this basic bro golfer, going for beers with the boys, not a very supportive social circle. You decide you got to make a change due to financial reasons, due to the addictions affecting your relationship. What were some of the early resources you checked out to start to make those changes besides the gym? Because and I know you're into some. You're kind of in the deep end of this stuff like I am now, but what were some of those early first steps you took? Books, podcasts, counselors,
Yeah, counselor was the one, just towards the end of my relationship, I was going to see a sex counselor. Then I was going to see a counselor after the relationship ended. During the end of the relationship, she was like, you should go join a men's group, and she had found a couple guys on Facebook locally who were doing men's groups, but I got weirded out by one of them and some of the content that he was pushing out, and I never did go and meet them. And then, after the relationship ended, I started to go into this. Okay, I started to go see a counselor. That was helpful. Turned to a couple books on porn and love, and I can't remember what one of them was called. It was a really good book. I'll try to remember it, but.
Any general personal development stuff, like any general books or podcasts or anything of that nature?
No, I had already done enough of that work and content. I could pull and tap into it again.
Like what kind of stuff from before?
Because I remember getting out of that relationship, it was like I talked to two of my closest friends and I said, listen, guys, like, I need to get off porn, and I need to look at it as completely evil, and it's wrecked a lot of my, not only this past relationship, but I've had struggles with other women sexually, and I do believe that it's due to, having watched porn for fucking 25 years pretty much.
Yeah, a lifetime.
Maybe even more.
Lifetime of porn.
So the focus was on getting rid of the porn out of my life, and that was the main focus, and then that's right around the time when you were starting up men's group, and my first meeting, I think you were just like, wow, that was awesome. I remember going in there and being like, guys, I've struggled with a porn addiction. It is the number one priority that I get off of this and I stop it. It's done so much damage to my life and me personally that I just don't want to do it anymore. And that was a big part of that, getting over that shame. And even, a conversation a month or two after breaking up with my ex, I went to a Sexaholics Anonymous meeting. It wasn't going to work out for me because there wasn't really much specifically with porn addiction and porn traumatization. But I remember she said something, well, how did it feel? And I go, well, you know what? It actually felt really good to go into a space, not knowing anybody and admitting that issue that I had and that struggle that I had. And then even furthermore, I just came across this woman last year or earlier this year. She has this book, and I haven't read the book yet, but the saying is just so true. And it's like, the truth heals. That's the name of her book. And I was just like, that was at play there. Like, the truth that I've struggled with this thing for so long, and it's hurt me in a lot of ways, started to heal me. I started to be okay with admitting it. And that's been a big part of anybody that I'm meeting, especially who is focused on personal development, personal growth, and bettering themselves. I'm okay to open up about them, about everything. Like, I need to be an open book because my ex would said, like, you didn't realize it, but like, the more and more you admitted your faults and your issues and your struggles, the more and more I loved you. I just wanted you to be honest with yourself and me. But I was like presenting this image that I was so much better than I was, instead of admitting a lot of these struggles and being okay with them, but also at the same time wanting to move past them, to be better, to release the shackles of those struggles.
Yeah, so you're presenting this image, again, stepping back in the timeline a little bit, you're presenting this image, everything's fine. Was it scary when you started to wade into this stuff, 10 years ago or 3 years ago with this relationship? Like, well, tell me about that fear.
Yeah, I can even remember having a conversation with her towards the end, and she's just like, well, like, we knew what I needed to do. I needed to go see counselors. I needed to, I was seeing a gambling addiction counselor too, and I did stop for about 6 months. But once the relationship was ending, I was just like, oh, I felt like so shitty that I turned back to that sports gambling addiction to make myself feel good again. But we had a conversation about it. She's like, what do you think is going to happen? I'm like, well, I want to change, but like, deep down, I have this fear that I won't. And I didn't know why I said that, but I can sense why I said it. And that was because like I was just so afraid of getting uncomfortable and getting into my feelings. And unfortunately, the relationship, it seemed like it had to end for me to actually like grasp like what was going on and what I needed to work on to get better. Because I had seen her hurt, and I felt terrible that I was the main culprit of seeing her hurt, but and also too not feeling that hurt to myself, and not feeling sad about the fact that I had a amazing opportunity to be with a great partner for a very long time, as long as I was willing to admit these things and overcome them. So yeah, it was like, okay, yeah, like I'm afraid of this uncomfortable change because my life had been so programmed into not knowing at the time, obviously, but like any sort of discomfort, boredom, depression, anxiety, it was like, okay, what can I do to alcohol, gambling, or porn? Those three things. Whatever.
That was the biggest habit you had out of all, even more than porn, and it's avoiding uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day,
avoiding
that's definitely what it was. Yeah, and then not sitting there and being okay with it. And it happened multiple times in that relationship where something had gone wrong, and I felt terrible, and I just turned to those three things to make myself feel good instead of actually just sitting there and feeling shitty and like, wow, okay, yeah, I don't like this feeling anymore. I need to stop getting into these situations, and I need to stop turning to these things and instead turn to some form of healing.
Yeah, so I have a good friend who's going through, he's at the beginning of this next stage of his journey, like yours, Jordan. His is coming in stages, and he said to me 2 nights ago when he was opening up about it a little bit, he said, oh man, I don't know if I want to get into this stuff. I don't know if I can get into this stuff right now because it might be too overwhelming. I don't want to open that can of worms, Did you feel anything like that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I continuously, you're talking about podcasts. So I think after the men's group stuff, I started to get into some podcasts more based around fear and being uncomfortable and being okay with uncomfortable, but how to deal with those things. And that was a huge part of, okay, yeah, this is going to be kind of shitty for a while. And it wasn't that bad, but it was always like this, okay, I know on the other side of this is a beautiful life and a more fulfilling life and a more purposeful life and a more amazing life. So it was always like, okay, that's it. Like, this is it. This is the breaking point for me. I need to push through, and I need to make these changes because I know what's on the other side is far better than what's been existing.
Yeah, that's so great. You're able to get that leverage over that fear of feeling too much. You're like, fuck it, I don't care. I had a similar point where it was like, I don't care if I feel shitty for like a year. I'm going to get past this shit. you know? Like I can't. Things have gotten so bad for me that the uncomfortable feelings were no longer the biggest fear.
There, and even like on that level, on the most simplistic term, is, I remember like earlier this year I'd been running a lot, and I remember like I'd have a lot of pain in my leg, but I would never stretch, or I'd never roll on a foam roller or anything like that to roll it out. And then my roommate was talking to me, and she was talking about like, yeah, like, you actually like got to dig into the pain to get better. And I was just like, God, that's just such a simile for like me and life in general, like
life in general.
Yeah, not wanting to feel pain, but knowing that to get into that pain and to release it, you're going to have to feel shitty to feel better. And I was like, oh, that's such a simplistic thing. So I've tried to do as much as I can with like just that release of the physical pain and being okay with it and getting into it for a couple minutes to know that on the other side of it is there's this pain-free life. Same thing with the emotional and spiritual and physical, or yes, emotional and spiritual pains that we've been holding on to, digging into them, extracting them, why they're there, when they were there, and then, releasing them is going to be so much better.
I can relate to that a lot because I thought, for example, with my nagging low self-worth issues, like not feeling very good about myself, that was like causing a lot of the behaviors I didn't like, people pleasing, being a nice guy, no boundaries with people, pursuing sex and validation, a whole range of things, addictions and stuff. And at the center of that was my self-worth. And when I got into that, it was like just so scary and intense. But I realized that there's no amount of things I could do to love myself more if that was default way that I was feeling about myself was still in my body. And so I tried for almost a decade to like love up on myself, like do affirmations or read this books or write it down or have things on my wall that show how much I love myself and how great my life is. Do a list of all the things I'd be proud of. And it never worked, you know? And it wasn't until I went the opposite route and said, maybe what if I go and hang out with this feeling I have in my gut that's like not very happy with myself? What if I do that? And then that then applied to the moment-to-moment situations. Hey, I feel like pulling up porn right now. What if I just go step away and sit with those feelings instead? And that has been the most healing, transformative thing I've seen in myself, and also in guys and men's group. If they're in it for long enough, they always get to the same place, which is like any bad habit they want to eradicate. It's like, the answer is always just step away and feel into those feelings and like become your own parent and like comfort those feelings.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So have you found something similar? That was a bit of a ramble, but it sounds like you have a similar practice now.
No, I mean, it's pretty similar. I still at times I'm avoiding those things.
Me too.
For me, the biggest one is when I do dive into, a little microdose of mushrooms. I've done a few plant medicine ceremonies and journeys, but just even taking a little bit of mushrooms, I start to sense physically in my body where I'm tired or where I'm holding some pain, or, some emotional pain will seep out. I remember even a couple months ago, I've got these 3 photos of my dad on my wall, and I remember just having mushrooms and actually taking the time to sit down and be with myself and looking over at those photos and crying just about how much I missed my father, but also how much, I would have loved to have a relationship at this time in my life now where I am going through this change, and he'd be so proud of me. And it was just like, oh, it sucked. So, but I'm not perfect, and I'm still struggling at times. We've had conversations where I'm, not in those moments actually sitting with those feelings and wanting to numb out to them and not feel them. When I do, I can get into them a little bit more, and I'm a lot better at not taking them at face value and running with them and running into them in a negative way, and just at least sitting there with them a little while gives me some sense of like, okay, what is this feeling? What is it from? But for me, a lot of it is always like you externally escape into a future with that thought and project what could happen, what might happen. That to me is a waste. And I've learned to thankfully try to be a lot more present and deal with things as they come. But yeah, I need to get better at it. I know it's a struggle, and I'm just, even when you were going on your what do you call it, a rant or a ramble, the Tara Brach rain method, and it's like recognize, accept, investigate, and it's like nurture or something like that.
Yeah.
So anytime a thought comes up that's maybe negative, it's like you actually sitting there, okay, recognize it, accept it, investigate it further, and then again, I don't know what the N is stand for, nurture.
Probably nurture it. Yeah, like be like
something like that, okay. Like let it fester a little bit, let it sit, but give it some thought. Like, okay, oh yeah, you know what? I'm struggling with this, feeling of being not whole, or needing somebody else to tell me that I'm better than I am, or things like that. But then, okay, going through that process, what is it? Why? Oh, okay. And then think about it a little bit further, and you might find something that it's like, oh, it actually had something to do with this 15 years ago or 5 days ago. But it's been quite interesting, and even just this recent book that I've been on, the 4 Agreements, with Don Miguel Ruiz, like the 4 Agreements. God, I'm going to be tested here on this.
yeah, you don't have to list them.
I know, but it's like be impeccable to your word. Don't take things personally. Don't make assumptions. The last one, always do your best. But like just recently, I've had a couple incidents pop up that I would normally take so much offense to. And, I wouldn't even think a little bit more about them and like, why is that person triggered based on something I said? Now I'm doing that. I'm not taking offense to it. I'm actually sitting there going, okay, actually, normally I would feel, and I do feel a little bit like this is a personal attack on me, but it's like, well, no, actually, wait a second. Like, it's not my fault that this person's triggered by something I said. So being able to just even sit with that thought, and normally where I would say like taking things personally, and you sort of alluded to it with the No More Mr. Nice Guy, always looking to external things to validate you as a human, and then when it's the other way around, you're like, you take it so personally, right?
Oh yeah,
So that book's taught me a lot in that sense, or even just, yeah, setting up boundaries.
it's a pretty popular book. So now that you're like, yeah, and it's really cool to hear. Just quickly, it's really cool to hear how you're continuing to struggle with
Oh yeah.
that, being present with those feelings, because I don't know a man where that is. I don't know anybody who's completely crossed that bridge. I don't know if we ever do. I think the default of the brain is to try to keep us away from pain. Maybe monks out in monasteries that are meditating all day can get there, but and so if you're listening to this and you're feeling like oh man, I'm struggling to get there too. It's just normal path. It's like trying to get marginal improvements.
Oh yeah, and I mean, even last night in one of the men's groups that I facilitated, meditation came up, and one of the guys who's been doing it for about a year, he was talking to a guy who had just taken it up, and he's just like, hey, like the word practice is there for that purpose, that it's a practice, and that every day, if you can get a little bit better and practice at it, and not jump to like the far end of I'm going to be able to meditate for 20 minutes and sit still and have no crazy thoughts pop in my head. Well, that's not.
And if I don't, I'm a fuck up. If I don't, it's because I'm not good enough. Yeah.
And like that's why I love. There's been so much more coming out about meditation and just even overall self-worth and being okay with like, okay, yeah, I've got some issues, or I got some struggles, or I want to be here. It's like, no, that be patient with this stuff and set these things in place, and don't just after a couple weeks throw them out the window because they're not having an effect. And that's it's been a typical thing for me too, is like if I don't see results, I didn't see results in the past fairly soon, I would just, that's it, this is done, this doesn't work, this is all fluff, this is all bullshit.
Yeah. So having gone from like being somebody who's like, I'm not looking at myself, I'm not being introspective, I'm not learning through myself and my own behaviors and adversities and stuff, to now being somebody who's on a very strong path of self-improvement and self-actualization, introspection, like what's that journey been like for you? Actually, I guess the first question would be, let's talk about the journey first. Yeah.
Oh man, like I just chuckle because it's been amazing. It's been so beautiful in a lot of ways. And I remember even just earlier this spring, I met a guy at a sound healing, and we just caught up. We kept in touch a little bit over the summer. We just caught up a couple weeks ago, and we were just like so in awe about like how far we had come in such a short period of time. Just for me, especially like trying to live to what my higher purpose wants me to, which I have in my mind. I'm not going to disclose of what it is, but like, and then actually doing these things to fulfill it then opens up this massive universe and these opportunities that things just manifest into my life. And it's been such an incredible journey to be able to just every little bit and every little person who comes in my life now, they're just amazing. And I'm so thankful for it. And I'm so thankful that I've gone down this path, because I said it a little while ago, but like on the other side of the struggles and the issues, whatever it is, there's always going to be something amazing and beautiful. And that's why I was chuckling, because just even this last year of what's happened and who I've connected with and who is in my life now starts from like literally like one thing. And it's opened up this floodgate amazing. Like I've got so many stories of connection of people just in my small little city of 350,000 people that I just like, I laugh, and I'm so thankful for the journey and for the journey to continue, because like I said, it's just been so beautiful and amazing of the people that I've connected with and what I've been able to share and what people have been able to share with me and what that has done for my healing and what it's done for their healing. And everything is just so positive.
Yeah. And the benefits are clear for me. And this is what I was going to ask you before, but I'm happy we talked about the journey first. What have been the benefits? Because to me, it seems like all of a sudden you're pursuing your passion that you felt stuck around for a long time with music. Yep. You're connecting with people more deeply. You're feeling better day to day and enjoying more of the experience of life, which is the little interactions, the birds and the trees, all these kinds of things. Yeah. What else?
I think the biggest one is not being hard on myself. Like,
Yeah.
if anybody's out there listening and wants to really do yourself a favor and look up this guy named Peter Crone. Peter Crone, I think, is one of the most beautiful human beings, and he's been on a couple of Aubrey Marcus's podcasts, and he was a huge impact on me loving myself more and being okay with my issues and my faults, but also to have that motivation to move forward. But that is definitely one of the biggest things for me, is no more beating myself up internally because I'm turning to that addiction, or I fucked up that relationship, or I'm just not that motivated with work right now, or I'm scared of this. That's been a huge one. The other one is, I just said it, fear. Like, I don't have as many fears as I used to because I'm not afraid of what people think of me. I'm not afraid of success anymore. I'm not afraid of failure anymore. If you come and operate from this place of internal happiness and achieving your higher purpose, like I said, everything sort of opens up, and the universe, to me anyways, has magically manifested so many of these great experiences and great people coming into my life. And I'm just like, that's motivation to keep going further and keep continuing on this path of this. And just even in this last 2 weeks since I know it came up again that I started gambling again, but since I've quit, so many amazing things have had happen, and I'm like, okay, I knew this deep down was going to be what would happen. Like, if I finally surrendered to the dragon, not slayed it, surrendered to it, laid my sword down, said, this is a fight I'm no longer going to win, I knew that something great would happen, because that would be sort of the full release, because I knew that I wasn't living to my higher purpose with this gambling addiction, but I knew as it went away, it would just, things would open up even further, because again, living to my higher self, my higher purpose, opened that up. And it's been amazing the last 2 weeks about how much positivity has flowed into my life, and I'm like, okay, yeah, like I should have done that years ago. Obviously not beating myself up, having regrets about it, but it just like, this sort of litmus test has been amazing, and I'm like, okay, let's just keep rolling with this and see what else happens over the next year or two, right?
Yeah, I can relate to that so much, man. And I'm so proud of you for this journey. Like the transformation I've seen in you is crazy. And in myself, I noticed the same thing as I continue to get into this pain whenever I run into it. It's like, and let that go. It's like, and continue to work on myself. Life just gets easier. Things feel lighter, more fun.
Yeah.
More of a game.
And I'm proud of you too. I mean, I know you've struggled with some other stuff that you haven't talked about too with your health, but it's like also too, it's almost like this, like it was like Friday, and like it just seemed like collectively everybody around me was also going through this transformational change, and they were improving, and they were happy with where they were in their life. And I was like, I was oversensed with some tears, but tears of joy, that like everything around me was flourishing, even though generally at this time of year in British Columbia, where it's November and like days are getting shorter, I would always go in a depressive state, like, oh, it's dark, the leaves are falling off the trees, everything's dying. Now I just see nothing but light and happiness. And it's like, it's crazy how that shift has happened just only over the last few years.
Yeah, I noticed that in the last few years too. People grumble about the weather and stuff, and I'm like, really? I didn't even notice. Like,
yeah, I mean, I know it's interesting though. You're like, you love to ski. I never loved to ski. Like, wintertime for me was always like basketball indoors, and I did like playing golf in the rain, but never much in the winter. But I just, anytime I go, like, I love hiking in the winter only because paths are less busier, but everything is just so flourishing with life, water flowing through streams, rivers, there's waterfalls,
mist and fog, and
moss is flourishing, and you can hear it breathing. Yes, the trees don't have leaves, but they're just collecting all the water for when they need it in the summer. And I'm just like, oh man, this is so beautiful. Like, I never would have thought that 5-10 years ago.
Speaking of 5-10 years ago, did you ever think you'd be going to sound healings or using words like conscious or evolved or floaty shit like that?
No. And I think, it's common nature to sort of laugh at the hippie sort of lifestyle. But, the more and more I'm embracing it because it works for me, because I think deep down that's maybe who I was, and maybe this golfer facade, you call it whatever it is, the typical bro, wasn't basic bro wasn't necessarily me, maybe deep down, because I do even remember like I used to love playing golf as a kid on my own because I was out in nature. I was alone, and it was very spiritual for me. Just even
Mm,
focusing on my footsteps and feeling the earth and walking and hearing the birds, listening to the leaves blow in the wind, the rain hitting the ground, whatever it was. That was such a huge part of it. So I think it's like almost really what's happening is that I'm returning to that, and it's growing even exponentially because I am interested a lot more in that spiritual lifestyle, and beliefs about the universe and ourselves too personally, our internal, our power as humans. And yeah, it's just been a really unreal journey, and funny to think about that. Yeah, a couple of years ago I would have just sort of chuckled at the stuff like, what about the moon cycle? That might have an effect on me.
yeah,
my
totally.
moon my
Sound
moon
healing. You're gonna lay down and somebody's gonna hit a gong and
What
what?
the
That's
432
kooky.
heart hertz hits my throat and heart chakra, or even like, dude, like even just thinking about, I think it's a relevant thing. I remember being in a plant medicine ceremony. We talked about it, but I had issues with my throat being very tight. But one thing that I've discovered is that if you're not speaking up about some truths, or you're holding stuff in, your throat gets very tight.
Yeah.
Your heart or your throat chakra does. I remember going to that plant medicine ceremony and having an intention to open up my heart, and that was what they were saying. Is like, well, you have a blockage because you're not feeling from here and going up to your brain. You're thinking first and hoping that that goes to your heart. That's the wrong way to do it. But what's the issue is that you've got some throat issues. So I released those things by literally pressing my Adam's apple into my chest. I don't know why I did that. It was just, but it's opened me up, and my throat is a lot less tight, and now I'm able to now speak up about things that I wasn't.
Without that closing on you, because I know a lot of guys talk about that experience. It's like they go to speak and it's like,
Oh, think about, like, I mean, I don't want to talk about, but somebody else I know right now close to me is going through a divorce, and what came up as a typical thing in the No More Mr. Nice Guy is speaking up to your partner about things that you maybe you haven't voiced, whether it's things that you want to do or things that you're wanting to discuss, whatever it is. You keep those things closed in. Well, this thing just gets tight, and that's not a recipe for success and to experience the feelings again.
yeah. And so part, beyond the internal stuff and, getting into kooky floaty stuff like
Yeah.
sound healings and stuff. And again, guys, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, well, I'm not going to do stuff like that. I didn't think I was going to get into stuff like that. Jordan didn't think he was going to get into stuff like that.
No.
And really at the end of the day, like try to put the words that you might find polarizing aside and just see these things as tools that are like, that seem to work. And for me, like sound healings are great. I just love laying there and hearing all these different kinds of sounds, these soft, warm sounds. Did it heal me? I don't know if it did. I don't actually know if it did anything, but it was a useful tool for me to get through a tough time. So, why judge that stuff? Keep an open mind, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think those things are little bits and parts of the equation, because you do start to take an appreciation, what we were talking about earlier with like birds and things like that. You start to take an appreciation for, like, a crystal singing bowl produces this amazing sound, and
Oh,
you're like,
yeah.
oh, wow, that is actually quite beautiful. And a big part of my journey is to balance this masculine energy that I've had throughout my life, not necessarily through me, but through others. And then, with some feminine too, but also keeping that balance there, and being tapped into more, like I say, the feminine energy. And even on that, like, I've tried to surround myself with more women friends, because that's something we haven't talked about. But like, I didn't have female friends. It was all male friends. And the only female friends that would be in my life were literally girlfriends, or an acquaintance of it'd be like a friend's girlfriend, but not like, someone I just go hang out with. No sexual anything like that, just two people communicating. I never had that, but I'm starting to not incorporate, but to surround myself with women to get a little bit more of that balance. And I think one of the things that I appreciate, and it was even at the plant medicine ceremony in the spring that I saw, was two women embracing and hugging. And I sat there with so much envy and just this overall sense of beauty, because they held each other for like 3 minutes. And I was like, wow, that is just amazing how women are so comfortable to do that with each other. Where the typical bro hug is like literally like, hey, bro. And it's like very cold. And the guy, when he wants to get out, he taps you on the back, like, let go, release, I'm uncomfortable here.
The release tap.
Oh man, it's classic. See, it's like a typical
Yeah.
body language thing. But it's so comical to see that. And anytime I get together with guys, I try to hold it a little bit longer to see what the reaction is, to push that comfort zone and
That's great, man.
see
I
where
love
they're
that.
at. But even like
Yeah.
now, some of the new male friends in my life, that are very similar to me in terms of the spiritual growth, they'll hold it and it's a warm embrace, and I'm like, oh man, that feels good.
Yeah.
That feels really good. It
They're
feels
not
really good to
scared.
connect in that level.
Yeah, they're not scared of that hug, that intimacy being misinterpreted as something, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
remember even going to France and visiting with friends. Like the men there, like they literally greet you. They do the old cheek pat.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. This is a little uncomfortable. But you start to embrace it. But that's just their lifestyle. And I think, a bit of a balance would be good and healthy for the North American culture.
Okay, so that's the key takeaway from this meeting. More kisses for men, Jordan Caron.
Just kisses on the cheek, just little.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you get into friendships, right? And first of all, I'd love to hear why you think it's important that a guy has female friends.
I think it's always good because you get a different perspective on things,
Hmm.
and especially a lot of what's coming up in the world right now is a lot of, I don't want to say it's like the male privilege, but also understanding women and their struggles that have been struggles, whether it's in the workplace, struggles with sexual assault,
Hmm.
allegations, things like that. I think it's always good to have that other person explain that more, and you to get that perspective of what they've gone through, what they struggled with, but also just get an overall look at their outlook on life, and how that can help you internally get better, and heal as a human, because I think women generally tend to want to heal a lot more than men, because
Yeah.
maybe they're a little bit more wounded than men, or they're at least open to admitting they're wounded, but they do go on that. And that's why typical you would go to a sound healing. I know you've talked about, like, go to a yoga studio, pick up women. It's not untrue. They're the ones that are there because they're the ones that are okay to tap into that stuff and get deeper into their heart and feel more and come up with these emotions and release them that aren't serving them anymore. So I think,
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like I love having female friends because even with really supportive guy friends like you and other guy friends I have, you're not like this. You're very gentle, but like with my guy friends, even who are doing men's work, who are on this path of self-actualization or self-improvement or whatever you want to call it, they can support me like if I vent to them. But there's this little undertone of like, okay, bro, get back out there and take action. Versus women, they just want to be there and listen to the feeling of it. And
yeah,
that feels nice sometimes.
for sure. Yeah. And I think that's a key component of what they do. They sit with it more. Like they'll sit
Yeah.
with their feelings more, or they'll talk. That's the other thing too, is that women tend to talk to each other a lot more about struggles, whether it's in their relationship or whether in their workplace or whether it's just themselves and another friend. They'll always talk about it. Men just glance over it like, oh yeah, boss is a dickhead, fuck him. And then like, okay, what's the score in this game? Let's grab some wings, right?
Yeah, totally, totally. That's it. And so that takes me to the last question I was going to ask about this journey of yours, pretty much, which was like specific to you, is like, how did you step away from those guys that you were just having beers and having wings with? Like when you started to get into your, I guess the better question is when you started to get into your journey of self-improvement, it's like, what happened with the dynamic between those friends? How did it feel being around them as you started to change and they were still doing the same thing? And then, yeah, I guess let's start there.
Really great question. And I was really interested to see how that would fold out, or play out rather. Fold out would work, wouldn't it? Fold out.
Unfold? Yeah,
I
like a
don't know.
map.
Maybe I'm gonna roll with that.
Fold out.
Yeah, I was really intrigued to see how those relationships would end up, because everybody, and everything I was seeing online was just like, as you change, you realize your circle will start to change and people will fall away. The biggest one was that even last year, as I was still not fully like committing to this change of wanting to achieve greater sense of purpose and to live to my higher self, I was struggling with that internal, like trying to meet new people. I was still hanging out with them and I was still drinking and I was still incorporating, but I knew that I wanted to, okay, yeah, I don't see myself in this circle much longer. And literally it was when I stopped drinking last October, that's when I started to get invited out less. The COVID stuff too was, everybody was locking themselves in. So that was a pivotal role too. But it was definitely the not drinking, and then it just became, I'd see these people less and less and less. And it was like,
And what would it feel like when you're out with them? Like how did it
it
feel?
was still fine because I still have a lot of my identity is still golf and sports. Um, even what's interesting, since I haven't been gambling the last 2 weeks, I haven't given a shit about anything sports. I have a
Yeah.
favorite basketball team, the Golden State Warriors. They're 9-1, but even like I don't even watch their games anymore because it's just like I'm not watching sports was just the reason to gamble on them, or gambling was the reason to watch sports. I still do love them, but it's so time consuming, and I know I need more time to do other things.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I was still part. That was still part of me, and it's still somewhat part of my identity. And it might always be there, it might not be, but I am starting to be like, well, actually, I don't give a shit about that stuff anymore, and I'd rather have a conversation with somebody about struggles with a relationship, or just even what are our goals and our dreams.
And
Or
what that feel like in the moment? Was it just like a subtle disconnect, or like feeling like you can't wade into certain topics with people, or how did that feel when you're sitting there with these friends you've been friends with for a while, like just like the discontent?
Yeah, it wasn't, yeah, disconnect. I mean, I can get engaged in a conversation no matter what it is, and I can get passionate about sports or politics. Um, but yeah, and it just was more about as I was not drinking, the invitations came out less and less and
Mm.
less. As I gave up my membership at the golf course, I wasn't playing as much. COVID had restrictions on me going to the golf course and playing. So those things all were a part of it. But like, yeah, it would be like, even I'd try to ask a couple of the guys out one on one just to do something. And yeah, okay, let's do it. Or plans would fall through and there would be no rescheduling on the other part. And I'd be like, well, okay, this is clear that there's not interest from your side to hang out. And I'm not going to chase you down all the time. So let's just leave it as is. And I'll continue down this path. And, now more so, it's been like an extreme disconnect. Like a lot of these guys I literally only see online and not communicating with them. And that's okay. I don't have any ill will. I still have a lot of love for those guys, all of their parts. Do I wish that they would maybe look internally a little bit more and make some changes? Sure, but I can't. That's not for me to say. So a lot of these guys just are sort of stuck in their way, and they're no different than I was a couple years ago when I said to my ex, or when we were just kind of entering a relationship, that I was afraid that of this change, or that I wouldn't change because I was just so stuck in the pattern
Yeah.
of going to those things. So it hasn't, yeah, it's just worked out interestingly. And, I, every once in a while I might shoot exchanges of text messages with people, but it's, it is what it is. Again, I don't have any ill will towards them. I still have a
No.
lot of love because they were very encouraging me, and a lot of them are still encouraging me of chasing my dream musically, or dealing with my shit. A couple of them have been like, yeah, like I know I've got some shit that I got to deal with, and I brought up the plant medicine stuff, I brought up the men's group, and I've always offered an extension of support whenever they've needed it, and a couple have reached out, and I'm appreciative of that. But I just realized that, like, if I do want to continuously go down this path of achieving my higher self and sense of purpose, I need to continuously surround myself with these new people. And even, I'm super excited. I'm running an event on my own next weekend for a group of 30, 40 people who are exactly who I wanted to connect with. And I'm going to joke during the intro, like, I'm doing this selfishly because I've wanted to meet you all. Because, a friend of mine had a conversation about being connected spiritually to people, and how it was a joke that I was going to go to Bali and do that, but he was like, no, go to Salt Spring. And this is obviously you. Go to Salt Spring. But then it was like, wait a second, they're probably here. So surely enough, I just put this event out there and created a very spiritual, healing sort of worship day, and everybody, like, it really resonated with people. So I'm like, it's going to be amazing. And just even the people connecting through email, I'm like, wow, this is awesome. So it's like, in some ways, my sort of coming out party to this community that I've wanted to connect with for so long. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, so it sounds like you were really intentional about filling that void. So like your old friends, you weren't feeling connected with them. The invites stopped coming. You probably had to set boundaries with a few of them as well. And then you move on to this, and then you're like, well, I recognize that I want to be around these kinds of people and talk about these kinds of things. So you joined a men's group, which is great. You started going out to events where you thought you could find those kinds of people. You started making, this is what I observed in you, started making, like, intentionally reaching out to certain members of our men's group that you connected with and building friendships with them on the side. Mm-hmm. And then now you're going as far as throwing your own events, specifically curated for your kinds of people. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. It's fantastic, man. The intentionality and how strategic that is. Is there anything else you've done to sort of to get more kinds of people like that around you?
No, and the easiest thing has literally been once you go and contact one person, their circle of amazing people that are like-minded is big, and all it takes is like a gathering where next thing you know you've got 4 or 5 people, and then you connect with that person, they've got 4 or 5 people, and that's how it's worked. Like literally, like I've just met a couple people, and next thing you know that's turned into a circle of 10 or 15. And you put stuff out there and see where people are at, and what you resonate with. Like even a friend of mine, I'm calling him a friend, I met him through the guy who's going to be doing the yoga facilitation at my event next weekend. I met him through a guy online on Reddit who was reaching out like, I'm an entrepreneur, I want to meet new people. We connected, and then his friend is this yoga guy, and we connected on Instagram. We exchanged some messages. We met up a few times in the summer, and then he suggested a photographer for me for some photos for my website and for my musical stuff. And I connected with his photographer, and next thing you know, our conversation isn't even about anything photography. It's about like our personal growth and journeys. I'm going for a hike with him tomorrow, and I'm super
Right.
looking forward to it because we haven't seen each other probably in about a month. He went on a big road trip to the Rockies, but like I just checked in with him a couple like last week, like on Friday, and I just say, hey man, where are you? Like what's going on? Like, oh man, like I had an amazing trip. I'm like, okay, dude, let's go for a hike. He's like, yeah, let's go for a hike. So it's, yeah, like you said, be intentional with the people that you're trying to connect with and get yourself out there. That is the most important thing. I know even in last night's group that I was facilitating, there was one man who was struggling to get out of the house after a divorce and meet new people. And obviously being a part of men's groups is a huge step, and part of that, even, we're meeting online, but I doesn't matter who I'm with, I feel connected with them, whether it's online or not. But there's going to be great tips to meet other people. And one of the guys said he was doing meetups, he was doing meditations, group meditations with people. Those things are all extremely helpful. But yeah, be intentional and get yourself out there. Get over the anxiety of meeting new people, because again, what's going to be on the other side of that anxiety is going to be this beautiful experience, I'm sure of, and you're going to all of a sudden surround yourself with the people that you need in your life to help you, support you as you work through that healing journey.
Yeah, that's great. I love how you worded that, man. Thanks for sharing that. You've been so intentional about it, and it's been so awesome to see that unfold to your benefit, and it's going to continue to pay dividends. I feel like a lot of people aren't discerning or intentional enough with their social lives, so it's been cool to see you take that advice you've been getting in our men's group to heart and really implementing it. Last question for you, Jordan. Like, for a guy who's listened to this, he's facing the challenges in his life. He's considering going down this path of self-improvement, changing, overcoming this challenge, improving himself. Any other advice you'd give him?
Not really. I mean, everything I've kind of blabbed about is all important. I would, always start with number one, giving yourself a lot of compassion and releasing maybe some shames that you have, and being truthful with yourself. That Four Agreements book, be impeccable with your word, is like, be truthful to your word and be truthful to who you are. Don't deceive people. Don't lie to people. Don't lie to yourself, more importantly.
Yeah, that's a
And
good
then,
one.
figure it out who it is that you want to be. Have that intention of who you want to be and what you need to do to get there. And more often than not, that's to surround yourself with like-minded people, to take in content that's only going to be of value and of usefulness for you in your journey. And then at the end of it, yeah, just put in the work. I mean, do your best to get over this, and accept that it's going to be a difficult journey and it's not going to happen overnight. Be patient with it. It's a practice. Each one of these things that you're going to do is going to be a practice, whether that's just getting out and meeting new people. You might struggle at the beginning of actually like starting a conversation with people, but it's going to be a practice. And the more and more you put yourself out there and put yourself in those experiences, you're going to get better at it, and it's going to be easier. And again, more often than not, what's on the other side of all this pain and all these struggles is going to be this amazing life, and it's going to be so much better. Not to say that everything is going to vanish away. I mean, look at me. I was been sober for over a year. I was sober of porn for a year. I turned back to some sort of softcore porn earlier this year, and the gambling crept in, and but it took a breaking point of you literally calling me on my birthday being like, hey man, like I'm struggling with this stuff. And I'm like, oh fuck, like this guy's pouring out his heart and his struggles with something
It's
that
true.
doesn't hurt financially. And I'm like, well, I gotta come clean too. Like I can't fucking pretend that I'm putting on this facade that everything is magically great. It is in a lot of ways, but there's this one thing still holding me back, and here it is. So it took that.
That was such a nice moment because like I was so embarrassed to admit that I've fallen off the wagon of my eating
Yeah,
issues, and you're like, oh man, it's so nice to hear that because I've fallen off the. Meanwhile, in men's group, I'm like singing your praises about how much you transformed and how you're off the gambling, and yeah, I can imagine what a weight that must have been off your shoulders just to be like, hey man, the last couple weeks I've been struggling again.
well, a lot of it was like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm not living to my higher purpose, which is being truthful and honest. I'm being deceitful. I mean, I was honest
Yeah.
with myself that I was doing it, but it wasn't honest of like what my end game was with it. I just kept on digging myself into a deeper hole. But I was being deceitful to people, and I wasn't being true. And I was like, okay, this has to stop. Like if I'm going to actually be who I am and be who everybody thinks I am, I need to come out and admit this and not feel shame about it. It was my old programming, the shame, the holding, keeping it in, not disclosing it because I'm embarrassed about it. I'm embarrassed that like, again, everybody was like, oh, it's amazing to see. And I still continuously, like I haven't fallen off the wagon with alcohol or my exercise or my overall mental well-being, but I just realized that this was like this last shackle and I was trying to release it. And if I just released it by, again, surrendering, not trying to slay it, that's the only way I could win. That was a huge moment, but I wouldn't have got there. And if you hadn't have stepped up and admitted it, and it was just like, yeah, I got to be admitting of this too, because this is hurting me and it's hurting me financially and it's hurting me mentally because I've been putting in this a lot of great work, but this last thing is like this last straw. I need to get rid of it.
The journey just feels like that. It's constantly getting these places of having those conversations with yourself where it's like, oh, I'm not doing good enough with this. I gotta grab a tool. I gotta find a book. I gotta find a podcast. I gotta talk to your friend. I gotta join a men's group, talk about this stuff. It just feels like that never ends. But that is, as the Stoic philosophers say, don't wish it were easier. Wish that you were better.
Well, that's an interesting one. I mean,
Yeah. In
you
the
know, and
face of this.
even the whole concept of work, like we're all putting in work in this way, and work doesn't have to be, the mentality of it's going to be hard, but more often than not, it is going to be hard. And we have to look at it like this work that I'm putting in, I have to consistently show up every day and get better every day, bit by bit by bit, whether that's reading one page today, 2 pages tomorrow, just consistently going along and flowing and living to that overall vision of who you want to be at the end of it. And the journey is all of it to me. Yeah, okay, it would be great to get to this point in time a few years from now, but like just this journey has been incredible the last 6 months. Like I said, the people that I've met has been amazing, and it's just putting yourself out there has been a huge part of it for me.
Yeah, it's been cool to watch you through it again, man. And I want to thank you for coming on today just to talk about your own journey from basic bro to woke sound healing guy. I'm joking. I'm just raising you.
Yeah, but I appreciate it, Sean. I love you, and I'm thankfully you had me on and to share my message and hope that it resonates with somebody else. I hope anybody else out there who is struggling with a lot of the stuff I struggle with can take something from this, or maybe my story resonates, and it's just like, yeah, okay, yeah, like, yeah, that guy, what he's been dealing with, I'm dealing with the same thing, or sort of similar. Like, and I, if he can do it, I can do it too.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. Love you too, bro. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.